Thank you so much, everybody. I know this is a tight spot because now you all you're starting the digestive process. So I'll try to make this, interesting. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for so many of you to come out and spend these times together. As Algie was saying, this is about dialogue. It's also about listening. I'm so happy to have so many students here. When I was studying at the Asian Institute of Technology, it was all about multicultural communication, how we better understand each other. And the first quality is listening and be open-minded. So thank you so much, Algie and team from the World Affairs Council, for hosting us. And thank you, Catherine and Lou, for making this possible. And thank you also to Frederick Mazar to be behind this. Algie already said a lot of things, but I really want to give a shout out to our honorary consul, George Hoffman, and to my colleague Nina Zindovic, who is really my right pillar, my left pillar, my brain, my legs, hands, otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So thank you, Nina. Before going into the things you really are interested in, I would also just like to express my thoughts and my condolences, but also my respect for the resilience of the North Carolinians. Is that what you said? Yes. The North Carolinians in the wake of the devastating impact of Hurricane Helen. I mean, the pictures we saw, the stories we witnessed, they were just so devastating. So the resilience of all these communities and the support we can give is incredibly important. So I don't know, some of you might have been here about a month ago when my colleague from the EU, Ambassador Jovita, was here. So she gave you probably the whole picture from Europe. So I will try to give you some perspective of Europe's second smallest country. We are not the smallest. You know which one is the smallest? Nobody said Malta? So Malta is definitely still a bit smaller. And from a country, I mean, Luxembourg has really Europe in its DNA. And you will hear for what. So, Algie, you already asked the question. Not many of you have been to Luxembourg. But I'm sure some things come to mind when you hear Luxembourg. Does it mean anything? Banking? Yeah. You know, when I go around in the US, sometimes, I say Luxembourg, Germany. That's like the usual answer I get. Then some are more daring and they say, mountains and skiing? I said, no. That is the other L country, Liechtenstein. Then, you have the knowledgeable, like Catherine, Financial Center. Then there are the ones we really don't like to hear, and it's fortunately getting less and less because it's really not true. Something, tax haven? Not anymore. We've been there. Then you have the more technologically savvy, they say space. Yes, commercial space. Then you have the politically savvy. They might know, the member of NATO. And then, like what Algie was saying, statistics hunters, one of the highest GDP per capita. But again, there are reasons for that. So while we add numbers, I just want to give you a few numbers. I know there are lots of bankers, finance people, students here, so I guess doing a little bit of math is not bad. So, 1,000 square miles. That's the size of the country. So roughly, Rhode Island, the size of Rhode Island. So just as you can picture it. 1. What is the 1? It's the only Grand Duchy in the world. So it's a sort of constitutional monarchy where our head of state, the Grand Duke, has a protocol role. The country is run by a government which comes out of parliamentary election. Then 670,000 inhabitants. So you see, we are a little smaller than what any US representative represents. That's about 750,000 constituents, and a little bit smaller than Charlotte, the Twin Cities center. 170 nationalities. And so we are an extremely international country, right in the middle of Europe. And these 170 nationalities account for like half of the population. On top, over half of our workforce commutes into Luxembourg from the bordering countries every day. 3. We have 3 official languages. Luxembourgish, has anybody heard that? I know Mr. Galles is from Luxembourg here, his family. The Luxembourgers you know, so it's a Germanic language from that region, but it's our own language. German and French are official languages. So we learn to read and write in German, then we learn French, and then after we learn English. So my work is mostly done in French when I have to do reporting, even though I consider French to be a very foreign language to me, and English as well. Good news for the business people. Business can be done in English. So we translate the relevant laws, legislation into English, and all filings can be done in English. We try to be pragmatic. 3.6. That's the average number of languages spoken per person, which is the country where people speak the most languages in Europe. And then the very last one, 3.3 million gallons. What could that be? Wine. So we produce about 3.3 million gallons of wine every year, which is actually more than North Carolina. So we are very proud of our wine industry. We have a little issue at State Department where they club us with the beer countries. So European countries are split between the beer countries and the wine countries. So we like to be considered as a beer and wine country. Okay, let's be a bit serious now. The question I always, which is intriguing, is how can there be a small country like Luxembourg? So I'm not taking a presentation, but when you look on the map, I think just a look on the map will give you an answer. It is landlocked, wedged, this tiny little place, wedged between France, Belgium, and Germany. And I think that gives you just a defining feature of why we are there. We are right at the dividing line between different populations, different cultures, different languages, the Celtic and the Germanic. And that I'm not going to be doing a history lesson over the last 1,000 years, because Luxembourg has come really into existence in 1963. That's 963. That's when we trace our origins back to this castle, where there is now Luxembourg City, which was built on this very prominent rock, which was basically untakeable between all these warring factions around. So the Prussians didn't want us to go to the Celtics, the Celtics didn't want us to go to the Prussians, so there was always really this strategic position of Luxembourg, which got its independence in the shape we have now, the country we know now, in 1839. And this is something I'm going to point out, and then I will stop with history, but I think it's important, especially to take the lessons of where we are today. In 1867, because we were there, and because there was, of course, the German Empire was disintegrating at the time, and we had the Prussian garrison in Luxembourg, it had to be dismantled, and it had to become neutral. So Luxembourg became a neutral country in 1867. So our fortress was dismantled, and we were not, closer to France or to Germany or to Belgium. We were our own neutral country. At that time, we were also a very poor country. And these are the first links we created to the US. So the soils in Luxembourg were very poor. It was an agricultural country. And so I know some in this room. And so thank you so much for coming. I also want to point out Brian Thompson, who is our new director of the Luxembourg American Cultural Society in Belgium, in Wisconsin. About a third of our population emigrated to the US due to poverty. And so I think we now number, and we can discuss about this, we have a diaspora in the US of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, some went back, but a lot of them are here, and even are here in this room. So thank you so much for coming and being here. So this is where we have the strong personal ties with the United States through the people here. Then we discovered iron ore in the late 19th century. So the first wealth of Luxembourg was based on natural resources. So we were blessed, and we started to develop the steel industry. Of course, iron ore is no more, but this is the first wealth we developed. Then come, of course, the two world wars, which shaped our country and which shaped Europe. And we had some discussions with some people here before. Came the two world wars, where both times our country was invaded by the Germans. Both times it was liberated by the Allied forces. And during the Second World War, and even though the Patton family is no longer here, during World War II, our head of state, Duchess Charlotte, when you come and visit us in the embassy in Washington, you will see a very beautiful portrait of Duchess Charlotte, who bought the house, which is now housing our embassy in Washington, D.C. She came here because President Roosevelt said, come to the United States. You will be a much more effective leader for your country in the United States to plead for your people, to get the political support, to get the support of the important diaspora. So when Duchess Charlotte was between here, Montreal, Quebec, during World War II, and then of course after the liberation, which is almost exactly to the date, 80 years ago now, after the liberation and after the end of World War II, of course being a neutral country, and now you understand, why I put so much emphasis on neutrality, was no longer an option. And that's when we became founding members of the United Nations, of NATO, of the European Union. And when you look at this little country wedged in the middle between all these other countries, we never consider ourselves as Luxembourg. We are quintessentially European, but we are, I would also argue, quintessentially citizens of the world. So we were very honored yesterday and this morning to have General Patton's grandson and his family here, because basically General Patton and the Third Army made history in Luxembourg and Belgium when they liberated our regions and when they came and fought. So we had some very memorable commemorations in Luxembourg with the presidential delegations, 2 congressional delegations in December. We go to Arlington Cemetery. We have a very active, and I think George, our honorary consul, knows it, a very active Battle of the Bulge Association. Bless them, we still have veterans there who are now about 100 years old. And so it's very touching moments, because it's through their bravery and courage, often in a country they didn't know where they were, what it was, but they fought for the freedom. And that's why peace is such an important dividend. And Europe is built on the notion of peace. So always keep that in mind when you think about Europe and the European Union after devastating world wars. They wanted to make war impossible. So, maybe you are interested also that I talk a little bit about, I don't want to bore you too much, so we can go into question and answers. I'm already loading the questions, let's see. I know you have many questions. Just a little snapshot on the bilateral relations, which really got a boost after World War II. The Marshall Plan was very important to rebuild the infrastructure. Most of the country was destroyed. And then we had the arrival of big American industrial players. So first it was Goodyear, who started in 1949. And then we had the DuPonts coming in 1963, Delphi, Borg Warner, Guardian. So we've been on a landing point for big American industrial players who are really a very important part of our economic setup. And what we are happy to see also is that Goodyear has a big research center, is having some of the most innovative technology there. DuPont just launched the third Tyvek line in Luxembourg, which is like the most performing in their production. So these are very important links we have with the US. We also see that, so we have a very strong trade relationship. The US is by far, and I want to bust a myth with which I'm confronted in DC a lot, the US is by far our largest trading partner outside of Europe, behind Germany, UK and France. We have structurally a negative trade balance, so that's something we have to put to emphasize these days. It is one of the most negative trade balances. Most of our trade is in services because we are essentially a service country. And our relationship with the US is in trade more than 10 times what it is with China, for instance, because that's what we get to hear so much in Washington. Our trade with China is less than 1% of our trade. Our trade with the US is over 8%. The US trade with China is over 11%. So I just wanted to put that into perspective. We also have quite a lot of jobs being created on both sides of the pond. I think in the US, of course, Luxembourg being so tiny, but we create about 29,000 jobs through Luxembourg affiliated companies. So I'm not quite sure where we stand here. I'm very happy that we have 2 Luxembourg companies, Twintech and TopScreed, here now. And the US companies create over 45,000 jobs in Luxembourg. So it's really, really considerable. And we have a number of companies like Goodyear, DuPont, but also the Amazons of this world who are amongst the largest employers in Luxembourg. You said it, financial sector. I think a lot of our economy depends on finance. And a focus of our financial sector are the investment funds, where we're the second largest investment fund sector after the US, with about 6 trillion assets under management. And what is different from the Luxembourg funds are different from the American funds because ours are quintessentially international. So it's all cross-border funds, whereas American funds are often national. And then we have 20% of assets under management which come from the US. So we have 11 US banks, over 40 US asset managers, 4 US insurance companies. So you see the links are very strong and very deep. Somebody was saying we want to hear briefly about sustainable finance, so digital finance. What Luxembourg is trying to do, we are always trying to be first movers, listen to what the industry needs, be open to new ideas. So over 10 years ago, we started setting up a green stock exchange to list sustainable securities. So now we have over 1 trillion of listed sustainable securities. ESG is important. So for the people who want to do it, they can. For the people who don't want, they don't have to. But we stand by this, and it's something which is important to us. Digital assets, crypto is a big topic now. We authorized the first
crypto exchange in 2014. Did you think about crypto in 2014? Not really. So Bitstamp got its first license there. Now we are working with Coinbase to set that up, and we have quite a forward-looking blockchain technology, blockchain legislation, so that you can use blockchain for your digital assets. And then I think what everybody wants to hear about is diplomatic relationships. So we've had diplomatic relations with the US for over 120 years. And actually Washington was the first embassy outside of Europe, which was ever set up. Maybe just a tidbit of trivia, because I think it's interesting, and I guess it shows the trust we have between our two countries, because there were many firsts in American ambassadors to Luxembourg. First of all, you've heard, because there is currently a book which has just come out about Pearl Mester, the hostess with the mostess, I think some people know. So she was one of the very first American women ambassadors, and she was sent to Luxembourg in the late 40s. And in the 60s, we had Patricia Harris, who was the first African American female ambassador of the US. Then in the 80s, we had John Dollywood, who was the first American ambassador of Luxembourg origins. So he was actually born in Luxembourg, emigrated to the US, and then he became ambassador there. And then in the late 90s, we had James Norman, who was the first openly gay ambassador in Luxembourg. So this is just to show that, there were many firsts, which shows trust and also a very deep connection. So what are the important issues we are facing today? First of all is, of course, the security challenges, so the NATO alliance. In our daily work in Washington, what are we dealing with? NATO alliances and our joint security. Nothing is more important than that. So, and in Luxembourg, we are in the process. There has been the war in Ukraine has totally changed the mindset in Europe. Now that war is possible, we need to be prepared for war. I said earlier on, Europe is a peace project, but actually, we have to be prepared to face war. So there has been a total change of approach and opinion, and we have to prepare the people to really up our game. And so, of course, the Americans are an incredibly important partner for us in that, because Luxembourg, we have a battalion-sized army. A battalion is about 1,000 people, so it's not if we have 1 or 2 battalions which are going to make the difference, but it's investments in capabilities, in relevant capabilities to strengthen joint security. So our most important contribution so far has been the satellite capacities on communication, surveillance, because that's where we have some added value to bring. So, NATO joint security. Then, the second issue which keeps us awake in Washington is to maintain healthy trade relations. And I know you are all wondering what we think. You can ask your questions later. We see the development of trade relations more and more in the context of national security concerns. What I always say here, the US national security concerns are our national security concerns. I think we very much understand each other and we know where we stand from. So having safe and secure supply chains, taking into consideration the security concerns, and working together between trusted and allied partners. So this is, regardless of what administration is in, very important, very important for us. So that's why when we saw, even at the late Biden administration, when we see that there are export restrictions on high-performance AI chips between trusted partners, untrusted partners, and then the whole rest of the world, we don't like that very much. because it just doesn't set a good precedent. And as Luxembourg, we fundamentally believe in the necessity of free and open markets. We are against borders. We need these markets to work. And then there are the last bit which keeps us busy in Washington is space, both from a national security point of view because of the capabilities we have, and then also commercial space. And there is a very exciting thing. We have actually a mini rover designed in Luxembourg, which is on its way to the moon, and it will be there, I think, in June. So these are the things we do in Washington, but we like to be out, and I am so absolutely happy to be here because you have to be out of DC, to feel and get a better understanding of what this country feels in different regions. And I've been so lucky to travel around. My first ever trip was to Belgium in Wisconsin. After my arrival here, we see, I will be back, as they say. So it's important to be out and talk to people. So this is why this is very exciting to be here. So maybe to conclude, and then we can open it up for discussion. I just want to finish with emphasizing like the three strategic assets, so that you have something to go home with. First, you have understood we are a hub, quintessentially international in nature. As I said, we don't consider Luxembourg to be our market. It's Europe and as a gateway to the world. So this is very important. Then we say size matters. And despite our size, or rather because of it, when you listened to our history, we had to reinvent ourselves so many times, from being poor agricultural to having iron ore, when that was coming out, to developing services, to have a strong industrial base, so to be responsive to business needs. So there is this thing, we have to reinvent ourselves to remain relevant and competitive. And there was a very interesting study now. We are in the middle of a technological revolution also, so we haven't touched on technology as yet. That Luxembourg is one of the countries which stands to gain the most from early and fast and clever adoption of AI, especially in the service sector. But we need to move. So this is a whole other discussion we need to have. So at the CES, I don't know whether any of you was at the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. We actually got awarded the Innovation Champion. Nina was there. Sadly, I didn't make it. My health didn't agree with me then. We got the award for being an Innovation Champion because we are so open and trying to be proactive on this scale. And something which somebody yesterday said, which is actually also in my notes, where we say size matters. Somebody told me yesterday, actually from your company, he said, what is the sauce in Luxembourg? It's because we are small, the paths are short, and you can get things done and sort things out. If you need an appointment, you can get an appointment. If you need to see a cabinet member to sort things out, you can get to see a cabinet member. So we try to maintain this human link, this human connection. And the last strategic asset, hub, size matters, I would say predictability. Even though we've had a new government, which I like to say to be very business friendly and much more proactive, we have had political stability. You follow all what's going on in Germany, what's going on in France. We have had political stability. I'm not sure I can quote it, but maybe I will. My husband, who is a journalist, he interviewed a historian in Luxembourg. And the historian said, you could say in Luxembourg a circle is not round and not get a reaction. Because people are very, they want to move forward, but without we're not going into extremes. So that's we hope that it stays this way, and we would love to welcome you there. So thank you so much again. I think I will leave it here because I know that you have a lot of questions.
Madam Ambassador, guests, I'm Steve Hunting, and I have I'm not often asked to speak louder, but the great privilege of being on the board of the World Affairs Council and seeing all of you here in this packed room. My job today is to facilitate some asking of questions. The ambassador from those of you in the audience, and I'll go ahead and admit to my bias towards the students. So adults, if I look across you and ask a student for a question, I hope you won't be offended, but we'll get to as many people as possible. If when you're called upon, there's a microphone that's floating around, if you'd like to use it, there it is. Just please say your name and maybe something from your school or your company, and then if you would ask a relatively short, direct question of the ambassador, we'll get to hear more from the ambassador. So that said, I'm going to call on this young lady here first.
Welcome, Ambassador, to Charlotte. My name is Lyra, and I am a 7th grade student at the South Academy of International Languages. I wanted to ask you that, as a diplomat in so many different countries, have you had to change your approach based on the cultural and customs in each countries?
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is a very good and very pertinent question. And you remember what I said before, when I was in my last year at university in Bangkok, learning about how you communicate and how you operate in another environment. You have to listen first. And yes, it is very different how you operate in different countries, because you have to try and become an effective operator in the country where you are. So, when I came to China and I was like totally illiterate, I didn't know whether I was buying shampoo or dishwashing liquid. And I was there was no phone which translated for me as yet. Now it would be easier. But that aside, every country you operate very differently. But saying that, you still need to keep your personality in. Don't give up your personality. Don't try to be what you think the other wants you to be. Always stay true to yourself. That is really a very important recommendation I have for the students. But in the US, can you imagine, I came here from Africa. And I just want to give you this little example. I come in the Sahel region and I say, oh, Sarah, how are you today? And how is your family? And how is your brother? And how is your mother? And how is your cousin? And it goes on and goes on and goes on. Then I come to the US, I said, Nicole, what can I do for you today? And what can you do for me? So it's like, oh my God. So you have to have your pitch ready. So, but every country is just very different. And that's what makes the job so exciting. First you come, you observe, you listen, and then you find your way of operating.
Yes, sir.
So thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Attendees from Queen's University of Charlotte, doing a master in finance and analytics. I had a very quick question, and it was really interesting to see you talking about the geographic position of Luxembourg between France and Germany. So I wanted to have your opinion about the rise of the far-right movement in Europe in general. We had elections in Germany recently, and we have seen that the far-right is increasing in percentages. I think it came second. In France last year or 2 years ago, we saw the same kind of pattern, and we can see that in Italy, in Hungary. So my question was like, what's your thought? What do you think about that, and how Luxembourg is positioning itself towards this apparently shifting in geopolitical, landscape in Europe? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this is a reality we have to deal with. And when you look at this reality, what is the most important is to understand it. Why is it like that? Why have we come, to this situation? And I think that is the most important, because it's only when you understand it that you can maybe have the more mainstream parties have a better proposition. I mean, we were talking about what happened in Germany at the elections over the weekend. And when you see that the right-wing party is the strongest in the former Eastern Germany, which is the area where the economic hardship is also the most important. So, but that is only one factor. So we need to go and dive much deeper. Why, there is this shift over to the right-wing parties, and then develop a counter proposition, which is more centrist, because in the end, most people are still centrist, and we saw that now on the positive in Germany. And this is how we need to go about that. I mean, there are deep-seated problems. I mean, immigration being also a big problem in Europe, and then you have to see why, or what type of immigration is a problem, what problems are coming from there, how can we deal with these problems. So it's a very serious situation which we need to analyze and then try to work to make things, to improve things, economic hardships, immigration. And the hardships have really become much higher after the war, with energy prices, inflation, all these things. So, and jobs shutting down. So we need to, and this has already prompted a lot of political development, that we have to be much more pro-business on European level, be much more pragmatic and maybe less idealistic on certain things. Europe wanted, had a very ambitious sustainability agenda, which I think is still there. We all want to live in a cleaner world, but we have to be realistic. How can we go there? And at what speed can we go? So I think we need to come back to much more realism. So, in a nutshell, extremism or shift to the right, do an introspection, analyze the problems, come back to realism, and then move forward.
Yes, sir. Who's there in the back?
Thank you. Cher Madame Ambassadeur, merci beaucoup pour d'être ici et parler avec nous. My name is Ferris Hamza. I'm from Queen's University of Charlotte. My question is going to be one that maybe you're expecting. So as you know, NATO has a commitment since 2014 to spend 2% of its GDP on military spending. Luxembourg last year spent 1.3%, despite being a founding member. And looking ahead to the summer and the Hague summit, it's expected that this target will be raised even further. What is Luxembourg's path to increasing its defense spending, and, as you mentioned, military capabilities?
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been something we've been working on very diligently. I mean, and that's why I put also the emphasis on Europe as a peace project, and we were at the center of this. So we have tripled in the last 10 years our defense budget, and it's not an easy thing. And then we are doubling again, and we are now trying to do even more. But this is not something you do from one day to the next. We don't want to buy golden bullets or diamond-crusted tanks. We want to develop relevant capabilities and, increasing resilience and joint security. That always has to be kept in mind. So it's an issue about funds, but it's more an issue about relevant investments. So I don't even like to talk about defense spending. I like to talk about defense investments or security investments. I think that's a very different approach. This is not an accounting exercise. but a joint resilience, a joint security concept we have to look into. So what I was mentioning before, it has been a total game changer because now we are trying from having our, of course, battalion-sized army. So we have normally invested over 40% of our defense spending into capability development, all at NATO level. We spent 17% of our expenses in Ukraine, so which is big. And now we're trying to develop new projects which are relevant. So NATO, I don't know how, I know that there are some people who are in this NATO group, so NATO defines national development targets. So we are just in the process of renewing those. And with those, we need to move up. But then there is one thing I want to say loud here, and thank you for asking the question, so you give me the opportunity to give that answer. Almost all the money we spend on defense in Luxembourg goes out of the country. Almost all the money you spend on defense in the US stays in the US and stimulates the US economy. And this is an important thing to consider. So what we are trying to do now, and there I need all your help in the room, is to develop local dual use or defense industries, and maybe bring in American companies who also cater to the European market, who can do some production, some value creation in Europe, so that not every single cent we spend is going abroad. So that is another whole new ballgame we are trying to deal with. So we are trying to also do some value creation, which we have in the satellite, but it's small. And if you put satellite capacity up, it's very expensive to get your satellite. The launch is less and less expensive. And then it's up there, and it doesn't cost. It's very relevant, but it doesn't cost anything once it's up. So you have a one-time investment, but this is an effort we have to keep sustaining and sustaining and sustaining. So we're working a lot on cybersecurity, on cyber ranges, and a very new thing we're going to work on missile defense now. So that is in a nutshell the outlook.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yes, ma'am. Very good. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. I'm Cadet Argueta, representing Harding University High School. From your experience, since you have been to and have seen many areas of the world's economic structures, how do you think us, as the next generation of leaders, can improve our global economies?
By being open-minded and showing empathy. I said that already last night. Listen to what's going on around you, try to understand and engage. If we break these links, and we all lived through COVID, and I think you lived through COVID at a difficult time in your life when you were quite young. We need to be together in a room and like what Alfie said, have dialogue, also listen to each other, try to understand. Sometimes disagree, that's fine, between friends we also disagree. But as long as we try to understand, and when you understand, then you can also then, find common and joint ways to move forward. I'm very concerned about this trend after we have moved to globalization, and when you look at our supply chains, I mean, what's in this pen? Things from all over the world. And I always look at globalization like an omelette. You have put the eggs in there, and you have or scrambled eggs, and you cannot remove them again. So we have to keep that in mind when we look at our economic relationships, and then we ideally do foreign policies based, taking that into account and be mindful of it. I mean, when you look at the trade deficit between the US and China, it has come down, but it's still $300 billion. So it's very significant. That means you need a lot of things from China. Does it really matter that this comes from China? Probably not. But do you have to be mindful on your data, what's happening to your data, on surveillance? Yes, probably yes. So, and then, that brings back to the issue I was mentioning before about economic relations, trade, and the national security perspective. So I think we are going to look at it more and more through the lens of national security.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question in the back.
Hello, I go to Central Piedmont Early College. My name is Anaya Frazier, and I was wondering, how can someone you know balance ethical considerations with practical policy making?
Thank you so much. This is an absolutely key question, and you never give up on your principles. But you have to stay true to yourself, as I said before. You have every morning to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. That's very important. And then if you are all fine with that, and with your country, I represent a country, and actually sometimes things happen I don't all fully agree with. So that's the tough moments, but it's not that I would be ethically disagreeing. I have not come to that kind of point. I think if I came to that point, I would really need to see, maybe I have to change jobs. So I think it's really important you don't compromise on your principles and on your ethics, and ethics are incredibly important in everything you do.
Thank you very much. We're very glad.